Welcome back. We've had some introductory videos so far in this channel. We're going to go on to a more advanced topic today, but first I wanted to go over some common knowledge about booster packs. So, here we go. Here's a regular booster pack. This is a revised booster pack, and as you can see here, it says 15 tradable game cards. Everyone knows that packs have 15 cards, right? Well, that's not always the case. Some sets don't have 15 cards. This says 8 tradable game cards. This is an Antiquities pack. There's several other sets that have 8 cards in a pack. And here's a pack here of Alliances. It says 12 tradable game cards. So yeah. So not all packs have 15 cards. Most people think that, but that's not really always the case. So we'll have a look at this pack here again. Visit the Shores of Imagination. Magic the Gathering Revised Edition Booster Pack. 15 tradable game cards. Deckmaster, a Richard Garfield game. Over here on this side, Magic the Gathering is a collectible fantasy trading card game from Wizards of the Coast, featuring over 300 different cards. Some are fairly common, some are uncommon, and some are rare. Every player has their own individual deck. Challenge your friends, but remember, your opponent isn't defeated until the last life point has been taken. So that says that the pack has, let's see, it doesn't say the pack contains commons, uncommons, and rares. It says that the set has commons, uncommons, and rares. So everyone knows that the 15 card pack usually has 11 commons, 3 uncommons, and a rare, but they don't actually guarantee that. It's just something that typically happens. It's what's supposed to happen. We all know it's supposed to be in there, but they don't actually say that they promise you're going to get that. Sometimes they make mistakes. There's the nice old Wizards of the Coast logo there, Garfield Games. Published by Wizards of the Coast. We got an address. Printed in Belgium by Cartamundi. In case you didn't know, Wizards of the Coast does not print magic cards. Might come as sort of a shock to some of you, but that's the case. They actually hire other companies to print the cards, and all the old cards were printed in Belgium by Cartamundi. That changed in 1996 when they started experimenting with other printing companies for Magic. Contents: 15 tradable game cards. 1994, Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering Deckmaster, or trademarks of Wizards of the Coast, Inc. So this says it contains 15 tradable game cards. That's what you're promised to get in here. 15 cards. It doesn't say how many are going to be common, uncommon, or rare. Something else that it doesn't say is that they're going to be random. Now, most people think that the cards in the packs are random. You're going to get 15 random cards. No, it doesn't say that. If you check out these other packs, same thing. They don't say random. So, are the packs, do they contain random cards? Well, yes and no. That's what we're going to be exploring today. The packs, the cards inside, are printed on sheets. In case you didn't know, sheets look like this. This is an 11 card by 11 card sheet. That's 121 cards. This one is a collector's edition sheet, which looks a lot like a beta sheet, and it has the same layout as Unlimited also, for that matter, except Unlimited's white border, of course. So that's just an example of a sheet. Not all sheets are 11 cards by 11 cards, but most of them were in the old days. So how do the cards get from that sheet into this pack? It's done by a machine, so there must be a repetitive pattern, right? that's the case. So we'll go into a little bit about how that happens here on this episode today. So here we are with the packs. Now I don't feel like opening any of these packs today, but I will be opening these two at some point here on the channel. So right now, just for an example here, I have this. This is going to represent a booster pack for us, and I wanted to go over a little bit more about the packs before we get to the sheet. So when you open a booster pack, it contains magic cards. 15 cards. So when you open a pack, why do you open a pack? It's because you want to see what you got. So how do you look at your cards? Well, the most efficient way to look at your cards is to look at them from the front side, because that's the side you really want to see. So let's do that. Okay, here we have a common. It's the first common in the pack. The second common in the pack, etc. This just continues, and this is the most efficient way to see what you have. This is the way most people open packs. And then you get to the uncommons, and you've got a few of those, and then the rare. Now, depending on which set you have, sometimes they're organized differently, like maybe the rare would be between the commons and the uncommons, but that's not the subject of this video. So what if you don't look at the cards the way most people do? What if you look at them this other way? Let's say you want to add some suspense. For some reason, you're not in a hurry to see what you have. So you flip them over like this. Okay, so there's your rare. Of course, there's only one of those in a pack. Here's your uncommon number 3. You see the number 3 before you see the number 1. Uncommon number 2, uncommon number 1. I think you see where this is going. So when you look at the cards from the back to the front, they're in a different order than if you were to look at them from the front to the back. And that's important for what we're going to talk about. So the way the cards get from the sheet into the pack is called collation. And we're going to have a look at that. Here we are. To demonstrate this subject, I've recreated the sheet that I just showed you on the table with loose cards. So this is a replica of what a beta sheet would look like. Now these cards have a little more space between them because they're in top loaders. Obviously they've already been cut apart, but the layout matches the way the sheet was arranged when the cards were originally printed. A few important things to go over here. The sheets only had a single layout design until 4th edition. So everything before 4th edition only had one layout. Now, depending on your terminology, how specific you want to be here, alpha and beta are technically the same set. For those of you who didn't know, alpha and beta are both 1st edition. They're limited edition, black border. They are the first game. They're Magic the Gathering. And they are 2 different print runs for that set, and they have some differences between them. So technically you could say that limited edition, 1st edition, has 2 different sheet layouts, and they are basically called alpha and beta. Now most people sort of consider those to be 2 different sets, but they're really supposed to be the same thing, even though they do have differences between them. So other than that, alpha and beta are 2 different sheet layouts because of some corrections and changes that were made. But no other set had more than one sheet layout until 4th edition. So, commons, uncommons, rares, this process is the same for all those different rarities. We're going to look at beta rares because it's fun. I apologize for how crude this model is. I don't actually own a full beta set. Some of these cards are alpha. Now, If you played in the 90s, you know that alpha cards are inferior to beta cards because they have those rounded corners, so they're all considered marked cards, and you can't play them unsleeved in tournaments. Bummer. Yeah, they were all worth less back then because you couldn't play them. So I like beta. So let's get started here. So how did this work? Well, the sheets were printed in the factory from side to side. I'm going to say left to right. I suppose it could be right to left, but let's just say left to right. So the sheets are moving sideways. They get printed again and again, like 3 sheets per second. Not really want to go into the printing process right now, but what we want to get to for here is that they're traveling sideways through the press. So the sheets get cut. How do they get cut? They have slitters. They're little rollers, and they're spaced. They're actually adjustable, but they can set them to different sizes for different card games, and they have them preset, of course, when they're doing a Magic print run to Magic card size. So the sheets travel sideways through these slitters, and what that does is it separates the rows. Now these are rows go this way, and columns go this way. So the slitters, as the sheet travels sideways, separate the rows of the sheet into individual strips. So if you could imagine that we have a little space now between all of our rows. So yeah, just to give you some idea there. So at that point, we have some space between all of our rows. We have, instead of having a whole sheet, what we have is 11 strips, 11 rows. Now there's also a margin piece at the bottom and a margin piece at the top. Those are thrown away. So they're not part of the process anymore, they're gone. But you still have margins on the sides of the cards on each piece here. So now there's a couple different ways that a sheet can be cut. It can be cut face up, like this, which is interesting for you to see, because you can see what all the cards are. Or it can be cut face down, which is the other way. And then all the cards would look the same because you're seeing the card back, and the backs are all the same. To make this interesting, I decided to demonstrate it face up. That way you can see the cards move around and track their movement through the process. So we have strips, we have rows, and after this sideways movement that cuts them into rows, then we shift directions, and they start coming, all these rows start coming this way, like towards me, towards the bottom. So there's a similar set of cutters down here, and those cutters separate the rows into individual cards. So we have, after they've done their job, the rows pass through, we have 11 individual square-cornered cards. And these little strips on the end, the margins, they get thrown away. So that's how that happens. The rows, as they come down the machine here, they don't, the machine doesn't care where the top of the sheet is or the bottom of the sheet. It just is constantly feeding the next sheet. So above that top row up there is the bottom row of the next sheet. And assuming this isn't the very first sheet on the press, then below this bottom row is the top row of the next sheet. So that's how you get cards from the top of the sheet or the bottom of the sheet. That's how you get cards from both areas in the same pack. So we're going to do this example face up because, like I said, that's more interesting for you. Now, as far as which sets were cut face up, some sets were cut face up and some sets were cut face down. Now, this isn't something that's very well documented, So you probably never really thought about that. But yeah, and whether it's cut face up or face down actually affects the order that the cards are in the pack. Let's say it's face up. Here we go. Oh, before we keep going, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. This cutting process is not used the entire existence of Magic the Gathering. This was used, I believe, prior to when they started designing for Draft. So that would be something around Mirage, Weatherlight, Tempest, right in that area. They started designing sheets for drafting, and the collation process changed around then. So this should work on stuff before that. I haven't checked every set, but I guess you could say it's a work in progress. But this is how it works for the old sets. That's mainly what I'm interested in. So, face-up cutting. Here we go. The sheets go sideways, they get cut into strips, and then these rows, they come down and they get cut into individual cards. So they get cut one at a time. So you have this row here. This is 11 individual square corner cards. Now, the next row comes down and it gets cut and it lands on top of this. So I'm just going to move them down here. That's the advantage of having individual cards. Alright, so this row has now been cut and it landed on top of this other row here. So now you have 11 piles of 2 cards. That continues. So the next row gets cut. Alright, so now you have 11 piles of 3 cards. Now here's where some of the variation comes in. How many rows get cut like that before something else happens? I've definitely seen 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, and 5 rows. It could be more, could be less. I wouldn't be surprised to see 1 row at a time or 6 rows. And how many that is, it's possible there could be a pattern to that, but it's large enough that I haven't solidified whether that's true or not yet. It could just be the whim of the employee standing at the end here. So, however many rows get cut, usually it's 3 to 5, but it could be 2, could be 4, whatever. However many rows get cut, at some point there, these piles of cards, these 11 piles of cards, get stacked up on top of each other. Now the place where they land is kind of stair-step wedge shaped to make them easy to scoop into a pile. So the way that works is you put your hand down here and you scoop them all together into a stack, and I suppose how big your hands are and how tall the stack is probably has something to do with how many rows get cut. But you scoop them all together and then you set them aside in a trough. That way they can go on to the next step. So basically you're doing that all day. The machine's feeding the cards to you and you're scooping them up every so often and setting them aside. So that's going to put them in this order. Now, how many rows it is isn't the same every time. It's not like it's 3 and then 3 and then 3. It's whatever. So, all right. So you've scooped the cards up. They're in this order. They get passed on to the next step. They go in the trough. Now these next cards. Let's see. When these get passed on, since we're discussing face up here, these get passed on with the face away from you. Now, these the next ones that get stacked and picked up, they get put right here, facing the same way. The cards have to keep always face the same way. So these rows, which are cut after these rows, will be in the packs afterwards. That's the way that works when you're cutting face up. So these cards are all square cornered and they're in the trough, and the next step is corner rounding. So the way that worked back then was that these cards they'd be picked up in big blocks of about 1,000 cards. Think of it like a long box, about that many cards, and they'd be stuck in this hydraulic press that had this card-shaped die, and this hydraulic piston would force the stack of cards through the card-shaped die, shearing all the little square corners off. They'd fly everywhere and make a mess. So that happened, but the cards stayed in that same order, and after the corner rounding, then they went on to being packed into the booster packs. So the cards are down, being ready to be packed in the booster packs. They're in this order, and so let's say we have rares. So a pack is going to get this one, and a pack is going to get this one, and a pack is going to get this one. Or let's say we have starter decks, and we got maybe 3 rares in a pack, or a deck. So we got 3 rares, 3 rares, 3 rares, 3 rares. They just pull them in this order. So that's what order they go into the starter decks or the boosters. Now it's the same for commons or uncommons. So let's say this were revised commons. 121 cards, same sheet size, same process. It's just what's printed on the cards is different, and the people moving cards don't really care what's printed on them. They're just, doing their job, filling packs. So maybe you need 11 cards. You're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So these 11, that goes in a booster pack, etc. The next 11 are in the next booster pack. So you can get some idea of what's in the rest of the box if you wanted to pay that much attention. So next, now that you have some idea of how that works, I'm going to go over how the face down cutting works. It's very similar, but some of it's kind of backwards. Before we move on to face down cutting, I wanted to show you what the pattern for face up cutting looks like on the sheet. Most people aren't likely to recreate a sheet with individual cards in their table and move them around to see what's going on. So let's just look at a picture of the sheet and follow the pattern here so you can recognize what face up cutting looks like. So when you have a sheet that's cut face up, you're going to start with the last row that was cut. So in our example here, that's this row. We're going to see this row first, and we're going to move towards the first row cut, which is down here. So we're going to start with the island right here. We're going to go to stasis, down 1, time twister. Then we're going to go up to drain power, brain geyser, Armageddon, reverse damage, veteran bodyguard, aspect of wolf, time vault, fast bond, wheel of fortune, etc. So it's going to keep going here and down, here and down, here and down, and that's how that works. So on a face-up cut sheet, you're going to start somewhere and move down the column, and then you're going to move this way and down the column, this way and down the column. All right, on to the face-down cutting so you can see what that looks like. All right, we've got the sheet layout set back up here again. This is a beta sheet layout. Now, this example is going to be what it's like for face down cutting, which is like all the sets used before revised, and Revised also used it, and some of the sets after used it. So this is going to be more typically what you'll see. So the main difference here between face down cutting and face up cutting is the way that the rows get stacked down here at the bottom. So if your sheet was face up like you saw in the previous example, what's going to happen is your bottom row is going to be down here, and then the next row is going to go on top of it like this, and the next row is going to go on top of it like this. So your cards are going to be, when you see them, they're going to be in this order: J.M. Day Tome, Will-o'-the-Wisp, Mind Twist. They're going to be like this. You're going to be going from your top row down. Now, when you're cutting the sheet face down, of course, imagine it's just flipped over. And so what's going to happen is this card's going to be face down. This next card's going to land on it like this. This card's going to land on it like this. And so, they're face down. So the order in that case, when they all get stacked up and set aside, the order is like this when you're looking at the fronts: Mind Twist, Will-o'-the-Wisp, J.M. Day Tome. It's the reverse order. So in this case, when you're cut face down, you're starting at the bottom of wherever you were and working your way up. So it really affects the order of how the cards are in the packs. Now again, this is as viewed if you were to open the pack and looking at the cards. That's if the cards were facing you when you open the pack, of course they appear to be in a particular order, and that's the opposite of how they look if you open the pack with the cards not facing you and flip them over one by one. I went over that a little earlier in the video. So, on with the example of face down cutting. Now for this example, let's make it just a little more complex here. Let's say that this sheet that we're looking at is not the very first sheet off the press. So we're going to say that there was another sheet that was cut beforehand, and we're going to move these two rows of cards here. So these top two rows, they are the top two rows from the previous sheet. So that's what we're doing here to make our example a little more interesting, so you can see how this stuff works. Just a second here, I'll get all these situated. Got to keep them in the same order for this to work. All right. So here we go. Let's scoot this whole thing up a bit on the screen. Yeah, that'll probably do, huh? Okay. So these two rows right here are the top rows of the previous sheet. Now the machine doesn't really care. A row of cards is a row of cards. So it's coming along and the rows are getting stacked. And so this row gets cut. We cut one row at a time. So this row gets cut and we end up with 11 cards down here. 11 stacks of one card. Now the next row gets cut. Now keep in mind this is supposed to be face down, so these cards are going to go what would be on top of these other cards. It's going to look like underneath here because I'm showing you face up, but this is how that would go. Alright, same story for the next row. And we're just going to keep doing this. Now on our last example we used 3 rows. On this example we're going to use 5 rows. So Bear with me a minute while I stack all these cards. Okay. Almost there. Okay. So there we go. We have 5 rows all stacked up down here, and it's time to scoop them up. So that's what's going to happen next. Now let's see, I got to remember the sheet's upside down, make sure I do this right. So it's going to be like this. Okay, that's a handful. So these cards are all going to get set aside in the trough and go on to corner rounding like we discussed in our previous example. But they're not going to go on to corner rounding until the trough's full. So they don't have to go right away, just sometime today. Alright, so this is going to sit here. I'm going to put them face down because we got to keep all the cards in the same order. So they're just sitting aside here in the trough, and the machine's still feeding me rows, so let's keep going here. Let's say the next time I've got 2 rows that I do. So these are going to come down. They're all going to be cut together. We have 11 stacks of 1 card again, and then this row is going to come down and go behind it. So let me handle that. So this is going to be just 2 rows this time, and then I'm going to scoop them and set them aside. Okay, so 2 rows. Same story. Let me just scoop them all together here, and they go in the trough behind the first cards. Alright, just like that. And then we keep proceeding all day long. The machine keeps feeding me rows, I keep stacking them, setting them aside, passing them on to the next guy. So, they pass through corner rounding, and they get over there, and someone's putting them in booster packs. So let's say this is a beta sheet, and these are rares, and they're going in, let's say we're making booster boxes today, not starter decks. So, booster boxes, we're putting 1 rare in every pack, but the packs are going in boxes. So there's 36 packs in a box. Each one has a rare. Now the sheet has 121 cards, 121 rares. That doesn't divide by 36. So wherever the first box is, it had the first 36 rares on the bottom of the sheet. And then the next 36, and then the next 36, etc., etc. And it could end at any point on the sheet. So depends on however many boxes we are down the line. That's where we start at with our box. So let's say, let me look at this stack here. Let's say we've got Plateau as our first card in this box. Let me see if I can find that. There we go, there's a Plateau. That seems all right. Okay, so these are in the previous box in this order. This is not 36 cards, so this is like the last half of the previous box. Just set that aside. So this box, now, this box, I'm going to go ahead and put this under the camera over there and show you again on the sheet how these are arranged, just like I did with the last ones. So give me a second. That's a plateau. We're going to look at the cards after it and see what cards would be in this theoretical box. Okay, we're back. Here we are with the plateau. It is this card right here. You see my pointer there on the sheet. So there's the plateau. And what's the next card in the box? Oh yeah, Black Lotus. That's all the way up here. Now that may seem like a long way across the sheet. If you were open the box, you'd go, how did I get all the way up there? Now, what's going on is these top two rows, as I just showed you, are from the previous sheet. They're down here. So what you actually did is you went from here down 5 cards. So I guess I'm off the screen there. You can't see my mouse, but yeah, down here. So the next card is going to be Mox Emerald. Nice. So we go up, and the next card, we're going to keep going up. Underground Sea. Time Walk. Two-Headed Giant. So as you can see, we started here, and then we went over a row and down 5, and we're going to come up to here, and then we're going to just repeat that. We're going to keep doing this same thing, over 1 and down 5, which is going to put us right here. Ancestral Recall. This is a nice box, isn't it? Mana Barbs. Wrath of God. Blessing. Royal Assassin. And then Righteousness. So we were here at Ancestral Recall. We went all the way up to here, and then we went back down to Righteousness on the previous sheet, and up to here. Now that's one of the ways you can get different centering within a box, is because sometimes these cards are from different sheets. As you can see here, that 2 of those rows are from different sheets. So after Righteousness, we've got Jade Monolith. Boy, this seems familiar. And then Web, Kudzu, Nevinyrral's Disc. That's a nice card. Reminds me of GP Vegas. We have, what is this, Savannah? Yeah, Savannah. Looks a lot like Scrubland. Savannah, it's right here. Then we have Nightmare, Power Surge, Shivan Dragon, Island Rare, Life Lace. So we're over here right now at Life Lace. We went up there and up to here, and then back to Life Lace. Next is going to be Winter Orb. And then we're down here to Mind Twist. And then Will-O-the-Wisp, J.M. Day Tomb, and then Sedge Troll. So yeah, we did these 5 rows. It was the 2 rows from the previous sheet, and these 3 bottom rows here, and now we're going up to the next row. So we're here, and we're going to go up. We're going to keep going up for however many rows we're stacked down at the bottom, and we happen to know it's 2 because we just did that. So it's a Sedge Troll, and then Mox Jet. And then we're going to go over here, Clockwork Beast, and then up to Thought Lace. Copy Artifact, Personal Incarnation, Cormu Bell, Living Lands, Pure Lace, and Illusionary Mask. Now, I don't know if you were counting, but that's 36 cards right there, Illusionary Mask, which means these other cards underneath Illusionary Mask would not be in this box, unless Plateau wasn't the first card in the box. So let's say that Plateau wasn't the first card in the box. If that's the case, then we're going to lose a Plateau, because this is the order the cards are in, and we're going to pick up a Verdurine Enchantress. All right. Black Lotus on top. What if Black Lotus wasn't the first card in the box? That'd be a shame, but it's possible. We'd pick up a Goblin King. Ooh, not a good trade. Same story with Mox Emerald. We'd be picking up Helm of Chatzuk. I'm going to stop there. You get the idea. So, that seems really familiar. If you guys haven't checked out Open Booster's beta pack openings recently, you might want to check those out. They're pretty cool. You can compare those with this information, and they're good examples. All of his videos are great examples for sheet collation if you want to compare to uncut sheet pictures if you look them up on the internet. I was there when he opened the first pack from this box at GP Vegas, and also the third pack at GP Orlando. So, let's see, what else? I guess speaking of open boosters, I met him at Rudy's shop, Alpha Investments, back in February, and he asked me a couple questions about sheet collation. So let me go ahead and answer those now. The best way to answer them is by demonstrating here. So let me reset up here real quick, and I'll just answer those questions real quick, and then we'll end this video. Before answering Open Booster's questions, I wanted to revisit the cutting pattern on the sheet here. In our first example with the face-up cutting, we were moving from the most recently cut row up here towards the first cut row down here, and we were moving from the right-hand side of the sheet towards the left-hand side of the sheet, like this. Now, in the face-down cutting, we went from the first row cut towards the most recent row cut, and we moved again from the right-hand side of the sheet towards the left-hand side of the sheet, like this. Now, you might be wondering which sets used face-up versus which sets used face-down cutting. And almost all of them that I've seen have used the face-down method, so you're almost always going to be using from the bottom towards the top and from the right towards the left. Now, the issue with that is that there's more than one way to flip a sheet. So, in addition to being able to flip the sheet from the front up versus the back up, front up, face down, you can also flip it from top to bottom. So that's what we have over here. This is the same sheet, it's just flipped over from the top to the bottom. So, using these same cutting methods, because the machine doesn't care which way the sheet's facing, it's just doing its machine thing, or repeating what it does again and again. If we have this sheet position right here, let's say we're face up, we're going from here this way. So these same sheet positions over here are Cockatrice, Life Lace, Winter Orb, Mox Ruby, Dual Land, Nightmare, etc. Now, if it was upside down like this, but face down, then we're going to be going the other way. Just like in our previous example, we're going to be going from the bottom up here. So it's going to be Winter Orb, Life Lace, Cockatrice, Nightmare, Dual Land, Mox Ruby. And it'll continue in that pattern from the bottom up. Now that may be confusing to look at it upside down, so what does that look like over here right side up? So the face-up cutting, as we just said, is Cockatrice, Life Lace, Winter Orb, Ruby, Dual Land, Nightmare, and it goes like this. And the face down is Winter Orb, Life Lace, Cockatrice, etc. So, I have seen the upside down sheet cut face down in 4th edition uncommons. So that does happen. There's probably other examples. I have not actually seen an example of face up cutting yet, but it could definitely happen. So if you see that you're moving from the left side of the sheet towards the right, then you know that your sheet was cut upside down like this. Okay, before I continue here, I wanted to make one note about mistakes. The factory did make mistakes. So while this method that I've been discussing for how the cards are collated is pretty accurate, occasionally you'll find an issue where the factory workers messed up. For example, things that could happen are they could drop a card, or some cards, or a whole trough. And in that case, the cards might get picked up off the floor and put back in the wrong order. Or they might not be picked up at all. If it's only one card, they could just fall, maybe into someone's pocket, maybe into the trash can, who knows. Crazy stuff happened. Another thing that could happen is when they're making packs, they could grab cards from the wrong trough. For example, let's say they were supposed to put 11 commons in a booster pack and they accidentally grabbed 11 rares. That totally happens. They call that a god pack. Things like that, crazy stuff. Sometimes you're supposed to get uncommons and you get more commons instead. So that's not normal, it's not typical, but it definitely happens. And there's plenty of filmed footage of people opening packs to show it. So, moving on with some questions that I got from Open Boosters. One of his questions that he asked me was how you could get a Mana Vault and a Mox Jet in the same starter deck, because they're way apart from each other on the sheet here, and if you've been following along through this video, you might see how it's possible, but let me go ahead and point it out here. So, to get a Mana Vault and a Mox Jet in the same starter deck, and next to each other in the pile, then that is a sheet that is split here. So these bottom 4 rows were together, or maybe it wasn't 4 rows, maybe it was just 2 and these were with something else, that doesn't really matter. But the point is, in order to get this card and this card next to each other, then the stacks, the rows piled up down here, and they were scooped in between this row and this row and set into the trough. So the way that works, just like I just explained a minute ago, we're going from some point down here, we're going to go up. So let's say Shivan, Island, Demonic Hordes, Will-o'-the-Wisp, JM Tomb, Mana Vault, and the next card is going to be Mox Jet. And then we're going to go up however many rows, and we're going to keep going. So that's how that works. And not only does that put them together, but specifically the Mana Vault will always be on top of the Mox Jet if you open the pack with the cards facing you. Now, if you want to flip them over backwards and flip them over for suspense, then you're going to see the Jet first. But in the stack, if the cards are facing you, the Mana Vault was on top. That's one of the alpha cards here. So, the other question that he asked was about Tropical Island and Black Lotus. Okay, so similar situation. That is a sheet that was cut, not cut, but I mean where the rows were scooped up and set aside into the trough here, and also, let me make a little room here, and also here. All right, so in that situation, we are looking at these 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those 5 rows were together, and those cards were going from wherever they started here. Here, which is Black Lotus, and down to Tropical Island, and on up. Now those cards, they don't really look like they're close to each other, but that's totally how the collation works. So we just go on up, and we go to here, then we keep going. After Ancestral, we go down to Ankh of Mishra. After Righteousness, we go to Zombie Master. And it just makes a difference where this line is, and that line represents where the rows were scooped up and set aside. Another one, well, I guess before I go on, so let's say you opened a beta starter deck that had this Black Lotus and this Tropical Island, and there's 10 beta starter decks in a box. So this is one of them, and your other starter decks in that box should contain Lord of the Pit and Monk's Pearl, this Rock and this Death Lace, the Bad Moon and the Mana Flare, the Timberwolves and the Force of Nature. Now, of course, this depends on what order the starter decks were put into the box, because you can also go the other direction. It could also have the Warp Artifact, Granite Gargoyle, Disrupting Scepter, Ancestral Recall, Ankh of Mishra, Lord of Atlantis, etc. We don't know if maybe you're going to have 5 starter decks in each direction from this point, or if you're going to have maybe all of them, all of the other 9 maybe on this side, or all the other 9 on this side, or split somewhere in between. But yeah, those are the order that the cards were put into the starter decks. So, let's see, any other questions? Recently, I saw that he opened an alpha starter deck. Now, the alpha sheets were extremely similar to this, but they weren't exactly the same. There were some slight differences. For example, Volcanic Island was not there on the sheet, and there were some other cards that got corrected. So, recently, he opened in his alpha starter deck a Pure Lace and a Dingus Egg. Now, similar story. It's that's a sheet that was scooped up right here at this point. So, if he had other starter decks from that same box, they're probably going to contain cards from this area of the sheet. So these 2 will be together, these 2 will be together, these 2 will be together. There's a Time Vault and a Fast Bond, that's pretty cool. We got these 2, etc. You get the idea. So that's how that works. Anything else that I should cover here? Let's see. If you enjoyed the video, let me know. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments there. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. It's a pretty complex topic. Check out vintagemagic.com for articles from me. They should be coming up. And click that like button and subscribe for more interesting things. Let me know what you want to see in the future. Have a nice day.